My 3 children and their spouses treated me as their on-demand childcare service, canceling plans last minute and dismissing my own commitments as just senior activities. But when they scheduled me to watch all 7 grandchildren during my best friend's funeral without even asking, I finally found the courage to start a senior supporting seniors service that now employs 12 retirees, supports countless elderly community members, and has taught my family the true value of my time and experience. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I never planned to spend my golden years as an unpaid on-call childcare provider. At 73, I had envisioned pursuing passions that had been set aside during decades of working and raising my own family, joining a painting class, volunteering at the Historical Society, perhaps even taking that Mediterranean cruise I'd dreamed about since my 20s. Instead, I found myself at the center of a family dynamic that had gradually, almost imperceptibly, reduced me to a role I never agreed to play. The ever-available grandmother whose time, plans, and personal life were considered less important than everyone else's. My name is Eleanor Winters. I raised 3 children in our family home in the small coastal town of Bayview, where my late husband Robert and I settled after his military career ended in 1980. Our modest 2-story Victorian with its wraparound porch and weathered blue shutters has stood witness to 43 years of birthdays, graduations, wedding preparations, and now the busy comings and goings of grandchildren. The floorboards creak in familiar places. Each scratch on the dining room table tells a story, and the heights of growing children are marked in pencil along the kitchen doorframe. First, our children, now their children. Bayview remains the kind of place where shopkeepers know customers by name, where the annual Founders' Day parade still features homemade floats pulled by tractors, and where neighbors notice when someone's porch light hasn't. Come on for a few evenings. When Robert and I chose this town, we were drawn to its sense of continuity and community, believing it was the ideal place to put down roots and raise a family. Life isn't about the destination, Ellie, Robert used to say. It's about building a home where memories can find you. He was a philosophical man, my husband, practical and steadfast from his years of military service, but with a poetic soul that emerged in quiet moments. He found meaning in simple things: the garden we tended together behind the house, the handcrafted bookcase he built for each of our children's rooms, the weekend fishing trips to Cooper's Creek that became a family tradition. Robert taught history at Bayview High School after retiring from the military as a lieutenant colonel. He shared his passion for the past with generations of students who still stop me in the grocery store to reminisce about his engaging lessons and the way he connected historical events to their modern lives. Mr. Winters made the Civil War feel like it happened yesterday, they often tell me. The way he described those battles, I could practically hear the cannons. I worked as a nurse at Bayview Memorial Hospital, eventually becoming the head nurse in the maternity ward where I witnessed countless new lives enter our small community. For 32 years, I guided nervous first-time parents, celebrated with growing families, and sometimes held hands through heartbreaking losses. By the time I retired, I had helped bring over 3,000 Bayview residents into the world, a fact that makes grocery shopping a lengthy affair as former patients and their parents stop to chat. Together, Robert and I built a life centered around service, family, and deep community connections. Our modest salaries provided enough for a comfortable life, but not extravagance. We saved carefully for our children's education, took road trips instead of exotic vacations, and found richness in relationships rather than possessions. Our home became known for its open door, a place where our children's friends gathered. After school for my homemade cookies and Robert's homework help, where new families in town were welcomed with potluck dinners, and where holiday celebrations spilled from the dining room into every available space, as relatives and friends crowded around mismatched tables assembled for the occasion. Jennifer, our eldest, was born in 1975. a serious, responsible child. From the beginning, who organized her toys by color and made lists of books she wanted to read. Thomas followed 2 years later, a boisterous boy with Robert's build and my tendency to worry about others. Melissa arrived 5 years after Thomas, our unexpected gift with a creative spirit and a tendency to move through life with cheerful disorganization. They filled our home with distinct personalities, occasional conflicts, and the daily chaos of a growing family that Robert and I navigated together as a team. Robert passed away 6 years ago after a heart attack that came without warning. Here, one moment as we planned our vegetable garden, gone the next as the ambulance sirens faded toward the hospital where I had spent my career. The shock and grief of his sudden absence left me adrift in the life we had built together, surrounded by memories that both comforted and haunted me. For weeks after the funeral, I moved through our home like a ghost, touching the coffee mug he'd left on his desk, sleeping on my side of the bed while his remained untouched, watering the tomato plants he'd carefully staked the weekend before his death. The silence in rooms once filled with his deep laugh and thoughtful conversations felt oppressive, a constant reminder of all that had been lost in a single afternoon. "Mom, we'll get through this together," my oldest daughter Jennifer promised, as we sorted through Robert's belongings in the weeks after the funeral. "You've always been our rock. Now it's our turn to be yours." She stood in his closet, carefully folding the flannel shirts I couldn't bear to touch yet, her efficient movements momentarily paused as she wiped away tears. At 41, Jennifer had inherited Robert's height and my practical nature, combining them with her own driven personality that had made her successful in Bayview's competitive real estate market. Her twins, Emma and Ethan, were 4 at the time, solemn-eyed as they watched the adults around them navigate grief they couldn't fully comprehend. Thomas arrived that evening with a casserole his wife Beth had prepared, along with their 3 children, Madison, who was 9, Liam, who was 7, and Charlotte, who had just turned 3. At 39, Thomas had established himself as one of the region's most promising architects, his firm responsible for the restoration of Bayview's historic downtown and several new developments that respectfully complemented the town's traditional aesthetic. "Dad would want us to stick together," he said that night, his arm around my shoulders as we looked at old family albums, "to keep Sunday dinners going, to keep his traditions alive." Melissa came the following day, driving up from the city where she worked as an event coordinator for a luxury hotel chain. At 32, she was still finding her footing in career and life, her natural creativity and charisma opening doors even as her tendency toward last-minute decisions sometimes complicated her path. She brought her 2 children, 6-year-old Sarah and 4-year-old Jack, along with a disorganized collection of groceries and art supplies to keep everyone busy during the hard parts. "We'll make this easier for you, Mom," she promised, her eyes, so like Robert's, swimming with tears. "Whatever you need, whenever you need it. That's what family does." Those words had meant everything during those dark days of early grief. My 3 children, so different in personality and approach to life, united in their determination to support me. Sunday dinners became a tradition again. My grandchildren spent weekends with me during those first lonely months. And for a time, I felt wrapped in the family embrace Robert and I had nurtured for decades. The shift happened so gradually I barely noticed it at first. Jennifer, always organized and efficient, began asking if I could watch the twins, just for the afternoon, while she attended showings or client meetings. "It would really help me out, Mom," she'd say, already unloading their backpacks in my front hall. "They love spending time with you, and it's so much better than leaving them with a stranger." Thomas would drop off his 3 children with apologetic smiles, but increasing frequency as demands from his architectural firm grew. "It's just for a few hours," he'd assure me, checking his watch and already stepping back toward his car. "Dad would be so happy knowing you're making these memories with them," Melissa, the youngest and most scattered of my children, regularly called in a mild panic about last-minute work emergencies. "Mom, you're a lifesaver," she'd exclaim over the phone. "Can you pick up Sarah and Jack from school? My client changed the entire event theme, and I have to redo everything by tomorrow." What began as occasional favors quietly transformed into expectation. The requests came with less notice, the thank yous became less frequent, and the assumption that I was perpetually available gradually solidified. My own plans or commitments were often met with barely concealed impatience or subtle guilt trips. But, "Mom, this is an important client," Jennifer would say when I mentioned having a doctor's appointment scheduled during her requested babysitting time. "Can't you reschedule? The twins have been asking for grandma time." "Dad would have wanted you to be there for the kids," Thomas would remind me if I expressed hesitation about a particularly inconvenient request, a comment that always pierced my heart with its unspoken implications about honoring Robert's memory through unlimited availability. "You're not really busy though, right?" became Melissa's standard response when I mentioned prior plans, as if my senior center art class or lunch with a widowed friend couldn't possibly compare to the importance of her needs. Initially, I accommodated these requests out of genuine love for my grandchildren and desire to help my children navigate their busy lives. I told myself it was natural to help family, that spending time with my grandchildren was a blessing, not a burden, that Robert would want me to support our children as they balanced demanding careers with parenthood. And there was truth in all of this. I treasured moments with each of my 7 grandchildren, delighting in teaching Emma and Ethan to bake Robert's favorite oatmeal cookies, feeling genuine joy watching Madison's developing artistic talent as she sketched in my garden, celebrating Liam's enthusiasm for the history books that had been his grandfather's. I cherished Charlotte's determined efforts to help water the vegetables, Sarah's thoughtful questions about my nursing days, and Jack's contagious laugh as he chased butterflies across the lawn. These moments weren't the problem. The problem was the lack of consideration, the absence of genuine gratitude, and the growing expectation that my time belonged to my children to allocate as they needed without discussion or respect for my own plans. As months stretched into years, the balance tipped from mutual support to one-sided expectation. My own life contracted to fit the spaces between childcare requests. Friends stopped inviting me to activities because I so often canceled at the last minute. My half-finished paintings dried out on abandoned canvases in the spare bedroom I'd hoped to convert to an art studio. The Mediterranean cruise brochures yellowed in a drawer beside Robert's reading glasses, which I still couldn't bear to move. My circle of friends, mostly women my age who had also lost spouses, gradually stopped including me in their outings, after too many last-minute cancellations. "Eleanor, when are you going to start living for yourself again?" my oldest friend Martha asked bluntly during one of our increasingly rare lunch dates. We sat at the Bayview Cafe, where the owner still served the clam chowder from a recipe unchanged since 1963. Martha and I had been friends since nursing school, had stood as witnesses at each other's weddings, had held each other through childbirths, career milestones, and now widowhood. At 75, she had embraced her senior years with the same no-nonsense approach she'd applied to everything in life, joining a hiking club, taking Spanish lessons, and recently returning from a solo trip to the Grand Canyon. "It's temporary," I assured her and myself, stirring my coffee rather than meeting her direct gaze. "They're just in a busy season with work and young children. Things will settle down." "That's what you said last year," Martha pointed out, her voice gentler than her words. "And the year before that. Meanwhile, you've canceled on the senior center art class 3 times this month alone." "The grandchildren needed me," I replied, the justification sounding hollow even to my own ears. "And what about what you need, Ellie?" Martha reached across the table to cover my hand with hers. "Robert wouldn't want you to put your entire life on hold, even for the grandchildren. He always supported your independence. It's one of the things he loved most about you." I knew she was right. Robert had always encouraged my pursuits outside of family and work. The night classes in watercolor painting I took when the children were teenagers. The hospital committee leadership roles I was initially hesitant to accept. The women's book club I founded at the local library. A happy Ellie makes a happy home, he used to say, understanding that my strength as a wife and mother came partly from maintaining my identity beyond those roles. But things didn't settle down as I kept hoping. Instead, the expectations grew. Weekend childcare expanded to overnight stays when my children and their spouses had work events or wanted weekends away. Occasional afternoons became full days. School holidays were simply assumed to be grandma days without discussion. Meanwhile, my own needs became increasingly invisible to my children, who had once promised to be my support system. Jennifer, now the top-selling real estate agent in the county, would drop off the twins with a hurried, "Thanks, Mom, you're the best," before rushing to appointments in her immaculate luxury sedan. The twins, now 10, were good company, but increasingly they arrived with homework requiring supervision, sports equipment needing to be located and assembled, or social problems requiring guidance. What had once been simple babysitting had evolved into serving as a part-time parent, stepping in wherever their actual parents left gaps. Thomas, whose architectural firm had expanded to neighboring counties, began treating my home as an extension of his family's busy schedule. "Mom can take Madison to her violin lesson," he'd tell his wife during their handoff conversations in my front hall. "And Liam needs help with his science project. Mom's good at that stuff." Charlotte, now 9, had developed a habit of asking me, "Are we sleeping at your house tonight?" when arriving for what I'd been told would be a 2-hour visit, revealing plans I hadn't been consulted about. Melissa, still the most chaotic of my children, had the most demanding expectations despite living 45 minutes away in the city. "Mom, the school called and Jack has a fever. Can you drive in and get him? I'm in the middle of a major event setup." These requests came with no acknowledgement of the 90-minute round-trip drive or the assumption that I could drop everything instantly. The most telling moment came on my 73rd birthday. For weeks, I had dropped hints about a special exhibition at the Coastal Art Museum featuring women artists of the 1940s. I'd mentioned it during Sunday dinner, left the museum brochure on my refrigerator where my children would see it, and even directly told Jennifer that the exhibition was opening on my birthday. I had hoped one of my children might offer to take me as a birthday outing, a few hours of adult conversation and shared interest that didn't revolve around childcare. Instead, Jennifer arrived at 8 o'clock that morning with a grocery store, cupcake, a hasty kiss on the cheek, and all 3 children's backpacks. "Sorry to do this on your birthday, Mom, but Tom and I both got called into emergency meetings. The school has a teacher planning day we completely forgot about." She handed me the cupcake with a single unlit candle stuck into its center. "The kids have snacks in their bags and they've been told to be extra good for Grandma's birthday." Before I could respond, she was checking her phone and backing toward the door. "Oh, and Melissa called. She's dropping Sarah and Jack off in an hour. She said to tell you happy birthday and she'll bring a proper gift this weekend. We'll do a family dinner then to celebrate." As the front door closed behind her, I stood in my kitchen surrounded by excited grandchildren and a single cupcake with an unlit candle. No proper celebration, no acknowledgement of my hints about the museum. Not even a collective family dinner on the actual day to mark the occasion. The twins immediately began arguing over which television show to watch. Madison retreated to a corner with her phone. Liam complained he was hungry despite having supposedly eaten breakfast at home. Through the chaos, I looked down at the slightly squashed cupcake in my hand and felt something inside me crack. A small fissure in the foundation of patience and accommodation I had maintained for years. Throughout that long day, as more grandchildren arrived and the noise level in my formerly peaceful home rose, I moved through familiar routines with a new awareness. I prepared lunch for 7 children with different preferences and dietary restrictions. I resolved conflicts over the television remote and iPad access. I supervised homework, administered medicine for Jack's developing cold, and attempted to keep the house from descending into complete chaos. Not once did any of my children call to check in, to see how the day was going, or to wish me a happy birthday again. The promised evening pickup times stretched later as work commitments, traffic, and other priorities took precedence. By 8:30, I had all 7 grandchildren in pajamas, with the youngest 3 already asleep in the guest room and temporary beds I kept for such occasions. Thomas arrived first, at nearly 9 o'clock, offering a distracted, "Thanks, Mom. You're amazing," as he gathered his children's belongings. Jennifer followed 30 minutes later, the twins half asleep as she hustled them to the car with promises of a proper birthday celebration soon. Melissa texted at 10 to say she was running late from a work event and asked if her children could stay overnight, since they're already asleep anyway. That night, after all the conscious children had been collected by parents who barely stepped through the door in their rush, and with Sarah and Jack asleep upstairs, I sat alone on the porch swing Robert had built for our 30th anniversary. The spring air carried the scent of the roses we had planted together along the garden path, now blooming without his careful tending. Across the street, lights glowed in neighbors' windows, families together at the end of the day, seniors enjoying retirement on their own terms, lives unfolding in patterns chosen rather than imposed. "Is this what you'd want for me, Robert?" I whispered to the empty space beside me, my fingers tracing the smooth wood of the swing where he used to sit. To become invisible within our own family, to exist only as a safety net for others. Though no answer came on the evening breeze, I felt something shift within me, a quiet awakening of the strength and self-respect that had defined me throughout my nursing career and my marriage, qualities that had gradually been muffled beneath the weight of family expectations and my own grief. In the stillness of that moment, I remembered something Robert had told me on our last anniversary together. "The greatest gift you gave our children wasn't the care and feeding, Ellie. It was showing them what a woman with purpose looks like. Don't ever let them forget that about you, or let yourself forget it either." His words echoed across the years with new significance. Somehow, in trying to support my children through their busy lives, I had allowed them to forget, and perhaps had forgotten myself, that I was more than grandma, more than a reliable fallback option, more than a solution to their childcare challenges. The next morning, after sending Sarah and Jack off with a frazzled Melissa who arrived without so much as a belated birthday acknowledgement, I called Martha and made plans for lunch that I promised myself I wouldn't cancel, regardless of what family emergencies might arise. It was a small act of self-assertion, but it felt significant, the first step toward reclaiming my own life while still loving my family. "What's the occasion?" Martha asked, surprise evident in her voice at my firm commitment. "No occasion," I replied, a new resolve strengthening my voice. "Just time I started living again." I couldn't have known then that this tiny rebellion would soon be tested by a phone call that would force me to confront the imbalance that had slowly eroded my place within the family I had built with love, sacrifice, and decades of unwavering support. The turning point was approaching, not with dramatic confrontation, but with the quiet determination of a woman rediscovering her own worth after years of allowing herself to become a footnote in her family's busy lives. The lunch with Martha the day after my 73rd birthday felt like a small revolution. We sat at our favorite corner table at the Harbor View Cafe, a local institution perched on Bayview's main street, with windows overlooking the fishing boats that still brought in the day's catch each afternoon. For the first time in months, I was fully present, not checking my phone for messages from my children, not mentally calculating how long I could stay before needing to be available for school pickup, not rushing through conversation to accommodate someone else's schedule. "You seem different today," Martha observed, studying me over her clam chowder. The spring sunlight filtering through the windows highlighted the fine lines around her eyes, evidence of a life filled with both laughter and sorrow, much like my own. More like the old Eleanor. I had a realization last night, I admitted, breaking off a piece of sourdough bread from the basket between us. I've been so focused on being available for my family that I've stopped being available for myself. For my own life? Martha nodded, unsurprised. And what brought on this epiphany? Besides the birthday celebration that wasn't. I described the moment on the porch swing, the memory of Robert's words about showing our children what a woman with purpose looks like, the quiet rebellion stirring within me. So what are you going to do about it? Martha asked, her directness, one of the qualities I'd always valued in our 40-year friendship. Because realizing there's a problem is only the first step. I'm not entirely sure yet, I confessed. I don't want to create family drama or hurt my relationships with my children and grandchildren, but I need to reclaim some boundaries, some sense that my time and plans matter too. Well, you're making a start right now, Martha pointed out. You're here instead of waiting by the phone for one of them to need you. After lunch, instead of heading straight home as I usually would, just in case someone needed me, I walked with Martha along Bayview's harbor front. The April air carried that particular coastal blend of salt, fish, and the first fragrant blooms from the planters that lined the boardwalk. Tourists wouldn't arrive in significant numbers for another month, leaving the town in that peaceful shoulder season locals cherished. We passed Harborview Gallery, where a poster in the window advertised the very exhibition I'd hoped to attend. For my birthday. Women Artists of the 1940s, Perspectives from the Home Front. Let's go in, Martha suggested, noting my gaze lingering on the poster. My treat for your birthday. For 2 glorious hours, we wandered through the gallery's rooms, admiring paintings, sketches, and mixed media pieces created by women during wartime, some famous, others only recently receiving recognition decades after their deaths. I found myself particularly drawn to a series of domestic scenes that transformed ordinary moments into profound reflections on absence, endurance, and quiet strength. These women created beauty and meaning while their worlds were being torn apart, the gallery guide explained, gesturing toward a particularly moving painting of a mother sewing by lamplight. They found purpose in the midst of circumstances they couldn't control. The words resonated deeply as I thought about my own situation. Not comparable to wartime hardship, certainly, but a reminder that meaning and purpose must sometimes be claimed rather than waiting for ideal circumstances. By the time Martha and I parted with promises to meet again the following week for the senior center's painting class, and no canceling this time, she insisted, I felt more centered and determined than I had in years. The afternoon had been a small step, but a significant one, toward reclaiming my identity beyond being everyone's emergency backup plan. That fragile sense of empowerment was tested the very next morning. I had just settled at my kitchen table, with coffee and the newspaper, a luxury of uninterrupted time I rarely allowed myself anymore, when my phone rang. Jennifer's name appeared on the screen. "Mom, thank goodness you answered," she said without preamble, her voice tense with that familiar tone that signaled a childcare request was coming. "I have a showing for a waterfront property in 30 minutes that I absolutely can't miss, and the twins' after-school program was canceled because of a water main break. Can you pick them up at 3? I should be done by 5:30. My immediate instinct was to say yes, as I always did. The words were actually forming in my mouth when I remembered my promise to myself. I had planned to attend a free gardening workshop at the community center that afternoon, the first in a series I'd been interested in but had missed last year due to constant family obligations. "I'm sorry, Jennifer, but I have plans this afternoon that I can't change," I said, surprising both of us with my calm firmness. The silence on the other end lasted several seconds. "Plans?" she finally echoed, as if the concept of her mother having immovable commitments was entirely foreign. What kind of plans? The slight dismissiveness in her tone stiffened my resolve. I'm attending a gardening workshop at the community center. It starts at 2 and runs until 4:30. A gardening workshop? Jennifer's voice rose slightly. Mom, this is an actual emergency. This showing could mean a huge commission. The buyers are flying in from Chicago specifically to see this property. I understand it's important, I acknowledged, keeping my voice steady. But my commitment is important to me too. But it's just a gardening class, she persisted. You can garden anytime. You literally have a garden in your backyard. Just, like you can schedule your showings anytime? I countered gently. Jennifer, I've rearranged my plans for you and the children countless times. Today, I'm keeping my commitment to myself. Another lengthy silence followed, during which I could practically hear her recalibrating her understanding of our relationship. I don't know what to do then, she finally said, an edge of genuine panic in her voice. Tom's in meetings all day, my usual sitter is out of town, and the school will just keep them in the office if no one shows up. Part of me wavered. The thought of Emma and Ethan waiting anxiously in the school office tugged at my heart. But another voice, one that sounded remarkably like Robert's, reminded me that this was precisely how the pattern had developed. My children had never needed to develop backup plans because I had always been the backup plan. What would you do if I didn't live in town? I asked, genuinely curious. Or if I were traveling? I don't know, Jennifer admitted. I guess I'd have to find someone else or reschedule the showing. Then that's what needs to happen today, I said, gentle but firm. I love you and the twins, and I'm happy to help when I can. But today I have a prior commitment that matters. To me. After we hung up, I sat with the unfamiliar feeling of having prioritized my own plans, the mixture of guilt and liberation, anxiety and self-respect. Would Jennifer be angry? Would the twins think I didn't care? Was I being selfish for choosing a gardening workshop over helping my daughter with a legitimate need? I was still sitting there, turning these questions over in my mind, when my phone pinged with a text message from Jennifer. Found a solution. Tom's assistant will pick up the kids and bring them to his office. Sorry for the guilt trip. Enjoy. Your workshop. The brief message contained no recrimination, no passive-aggressive undertone, just a straightforward acknowledgement that she had found an alternative solution. Something warm unfurled in my chest, a tentative hope that perhaps setting this small boundary wouldn't destroy our relationship after all, that my children might be more capable of respecting my time than I'd given them credit for. Emboldened. By this small success, I decided to attend the Senior Center's weekly painting class the following day. Another activity I'd repeatedly signed up for and then abandoned when family needs arose. The instructor, a retired art teacher named Gloria, welcomed me with surprised delight. Eleanor, we'd almost given up on seeing you again, she said, helping me set up an easel near the large windows overlooking the center's garden. It's been, 3 months? 4, I admitted, feeling a pang of regret for all the missed opportunities. But I'm recommitting to being here each week now. The 2 hours of peaceful creation that followed were like a meditation. Mixing colors, making deliberate brushstrokes, focusing entirely on the play of light across the still life arrangement Gloria had set up. I found myself using techniques I'd learned years ago in those night classes Robert had encouraged me to take. Skills that had lain dormant while I devoted myself to grandchildren's needs and children's schedules. You haven't lost your touch, Gloria commented, pausing behind me to study my half-finished painting of fruit and pottery. The talent was just waiting for you to make time for it again. Those words stayed with me as I drove home, a reminder that parts of myself had been patiently waiting all this time. Not gone, just neglected. What else had I set aside that might still be there, waiting to be reclaimed? The next few days brought small tests and modest victories as I continued setting gentle boundaries, Thomas called on Thursday morning, asking if I could pick up Charlotte from school for a dentist appointment that he'd forgotten to request time off for. I explained that I had plans with Martha that couldn't be changed, suggested he look into the school's aftercare program that would watch children until parents could arrive. Melissa texted on Friday wondering if the children could stay with me for the weekend while she attended a friend's wedding, giving me less than 24 hours notice for what would have been a 3-day commitment. I responded that I already had plans but would be happy to have them the following weekend if she gave me advance notice. Each time I held firm to a boundary, I braced myself for anger, guilt trips, or emotional manipulation. Instead, I discovered my children were remarkably adaptable when forced to find alternatives. Thomas scheduled the dentist appointment for a day when his wife could leave work early. Melissa arranged for her children to stay with their father for the weekend, an option that had apparently been available all along but not utilized because Grandma's house is more fun. By the following Tuesday, almost a week after my birthday non-celebration, I felt a new equilibrium establishing itself, one where I could still be a loving, involved grandmother without being constantly on call. I had attended the gardening workshop, participated in the painting class, joined Martha and 2 other friends for dinner at Bayview's new Italian restaurant, and even signed up for a weekend day trip to a nearby botanical garden organized by the senior center. That morning, I sat at my kitchen table making a list of other activities and interests I wanted to reclaim or explore. Volunteering at the Historical Society Museum, where Robert had sometimes given talks about local military history, joining the library's book club that met monthly to discuss contemporary fiction, investigating whether the community college offered courses for seniors interested in digital photography, something I'd been curious about since receiving a smartphone with a decent camera for Christmas. The list was growing, the possibilities expanding with each item I wrote, when my phone rang. Martha's name appeared on the screen. "I was just thinking about you," I answered cheerfully. "I'm making a list of all the things I want to do now that I'm reclaiming my time. There's a photography course at the community college I think we should— Eleanor." The single word cut through my enthusiasm, Martha's voice uncharacteristically serious. "I need to tell you something difficult." The pen I'd been writing with stilled on the paper. "What is it? Are you all right?" A slight pause, then— "No, I'm not all right. I've been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, Eleanor. Stage 4. The doctors found it yesterday during those tests I've been having for the stomach pain." The world seemed to tilt on its axis, my kitchen suddenly unfamiliar around me. Martha, vibrant, no-nonsense Martha who had hiked the Grand Canyon at 75, couldn't be facing such a diagnosis. The universe wouldn't be so cruel as to take another person I loved so soon after Robert. How— I couldn't even formulate a coherent question, shock rendering me nearly speechless. "It's advanced," Martha said, her voice steady despite delivering such devastating news. "They're talking about making me comfortable rather than aggressive treatment. At this point, maybe a few months," they said. No. The denial burst from me, instinctive and useless. There must be clinical trials, specialists, something. "I've already asked those questions," she interrupted gently. "At my age, with the advancement of the disease— Well, I've been a nurse too long to believe in medical miracles, Eleanor. Same as you." She was right, of course. We had both seen enough death during our nursing careers to recognize when medicine had reached its limits, but the professional knowledge did nothing to ease the personal devastation. "What can I do?" I asked, falling back on the practical question that had guided me through every crisis. "Do you need me to come over now? Take you to appointments? Research options?" "Actually," Martha said, "I'm calling to ask you to be my medical proxy and to help me navigate what comes next. My children are both overseas, as you know, and though they'll come when they can, I need someone here who understands both medicine and me. Someone who won't push me toward futile interventions when the time comes to focus on quality over quantity." The responsibility she was asking me to assume was enormous. To help my oldest friend make end-of-life decisions, to potentially be the person authorizing palliative care when active treatment ended, to stand as family when her actual family couldn't be present. It would require time, emotional energy, and unwavering presence during difficult weeks and months ahead. "Of course I will," I said without hesitation. "Whatever you need, whenever you need it. I'm here." We talked for nearly an hour, discussing practical matters about her diagnosis, exploring her wishes for the coming months, reminiscing about our decades of friendship that had seen us through marriages, children, careers, and now would see us through this final challenge. By the time we hung up, promising to meet the following day to begin organizing her affairs, my neat list of personal goals seemed trivial in comparison to what now lay ahead. I spent the rest of the morning in a fog of shock and grief, moving through household tasks automatically while my mind tried to process the impending loss of my dearest friend. At noon, I forced myself to eat a light lunch, knowing from experience that physical neglect wouldn't help the emotional toll of supporting a loved one through terminal illness. I was just finishing when my phone rang again. Thomas's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail. I didn't have the emotional bandwidth for another childcare request, not today when Martha's diagnosis had left me raw and reeling. But years of always being available to my family couldn't be overcome in a single week, so I answered. "Mom." "Thank goodness." Thomas sounded harried background noise suggesting he was calling from his office. "Listen, I have a huge favor to ask. Beth's mother has had a fall and broken her hip. Beth's flying to Arizona tomorrow to help out with the surgery and recovery, which leaves me solo parenting for at least 2 weeks while also trying to manage the Henderson project that's behind schedule." My heart sank, sensing what was coming. "I was wondering if the kids could stay with you after school each day until I can pick them up around 7. I know it's a lot to ask, but Beth's really worried about her mom, and the kids all have activities that I can't manage alone with my work schedule and—" "Thomas," I interrupted gently, "I'm so sorry about Beth's mother. That must be very stressful for all of you. But I'm afraid I can't commit to daily childcare for the next 2 weeks. "Oh." The surprise in his voice was evident. "Do you have something scheduled?" I thought of Martha, of the difficult journey we were beginning together, of the emotional reserves I would need to support her through her final months. "Yes," I said simply. "I have a commitment that requires my time and attention right now. It's not something I can reschedule or set aside." "Is everything okay, Mom?" A note of concern entered his voice. "You sound strange. Are you sick? They say?" Question brought a sad smile to my lips. It had taken my refusing to provide childcare for him to consider that I might have my own challenges or needs. "I'm not sick," I assured him, "but I'm dealing with something important that I'm not ready to discuss yet." "Well, can you at least take them some of the days?" he pressed. "Maybe just Madison and Liam? Charlotte could go to a friend's house after school." I closed my eyes, summoning the strength to hold firm. "No, Thomas. I'm sorry, but I can't commit to any regular childcare right now. You'll need to find another solution." "But what am I supposed to do?" The frustration in his voice was edging toward anger. "You're always available for the kids. We count on you for this kind of situation." His words, "We count on you," crystallized everything that had gone wrong in our family dynamic. Not "we appreciate when you can help," or "we're grateful when you're available," but "we count on you," as if my availability was an entitlement rather than a gift. "That's exactly the problem," I said quietly. "You've all come to count on me regardless of what's happening in my own life. But I'm a person with my own needs and challenges, Thomas, not just a childcare solution." A heavy silence fell between us, broken only by the muffled sounds of his architecture firm in the background. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted, from frustration to something closer to shame. "You're right," he admitted. "We've taken you for granted. I've taken you for granted. It's just, you've always been there, Mom. You've never said no before." "That's been my failure," I acknowledged. I should have established better boundaries long ago, but I'm doing it now, and I need you to respect that I cannot be your childcare solution for the next 2 weeks. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, emotionally drained from both conversations, Martha's devastating news and the unexpected confrontation with Thomas. Part of me felt guilty for refusing to help when his family was facing a legitimate crisis. The other part recognized that I needed to preserve my emotional and physical energy for supporting Martha, that I couldn't be fully present for her if I was juggling 7 grandchildren's schedules and needs. The phone rang again less than 30 minutes later. Jennifer's name appeared on the screen, and I answered with a weary, "Hello." "Mom, Thomas just called me," she began without greeting. "He said you refused to help with the kids while Beth is away taking care of her mother. That doesn't sound like you at all. Are you okay?" The genuine concern in her voice was touching, even as I registered that it had taken a direct no for my children to wonder about my well-being. "I'm dealing with something difficult right now," I explained. "Something that requires my time and attention." "Are you ill?" Jennifer asked, the same question Thomas had posed. "You should have told us if you're having health problems." "I'm not ill," I assured her. "But I'm not ready to discuss the details yet. I just need you all to understand that I can't be the default childcare provider right now." Jennifer was silent for a moment, then asked in a softer tone, "Is this about your birthday? Because we really do feel terrible about that. We were going to take you to dinner this weekend to make up for it." "No, it's not about my birthday," I said, though the reminder of their thoughtlessness stung anew. "This is something else entirely, something important." "Well, can you at least give us some idea of what's going on? We're worried about you." I hesitated, not wanting to share Martha's diagnosis before she had told her own children, yet needing my family to understand the seriousness of what I was facing. "A very dear friend is going through a health crisis," I finally said. "She needs my support right now, and that's where my priority has to be." "Oh." Jennifer sounded relieved that it wasn't my health at stake, but also slightly dismissive. "Well, I'm sorry about your friend, of course. But surely you can still watch the children sometimes. They could be quiet while your friend visits, or you could bring them along to see her if she's well enough." Her suggestion, that my commitment to Martha could be managed around childcare rather than the reverse, perfectly illustrated how my family had come to view my time and priorities. They simply couldn't conceive of something in my life taking precedence over their needs. "No, Jennifer," I said firmly. "This isn't about a casual visit with a friend. This is about end-of-life care and medical decision-making for someone I've known for over 50 years. It will require significant time and emotional energy that I won't have if I'm also trying to manage 7 grandchildren's schedules." My blunt explanation finally seemed to penetrate. "End-of-life care?" she repeated, her voice softening. "Mom, I'm so sorry. Is it Martha? Is she sick?" "Yes," I admitted, knowing Martha wouldn't mind Jennifer knowing. "It's pancreatic cancer, stage 4. She just got the diagnosis yesterday." "That's awful," Jennifer said, and I could hear genuine sympathy in her voice. "She's been your friend forever. I remember her bringing us those terrible sugar-free candies when we had chicken pox because we couldn't have regular treats while we were sick." The random memory brought a sad smile to my face. Martha had indeed been present through every family, milestone and crisis, just as I had been there for hers. "Yes, that sounds like Martha. Always practical, even with treats." "Of course you need to be there for her," Jennifer acknowledged. "I understand now. But Mom, you should have just explained this from the beginning instead of suddenly refusing to help with the kids. We would have understood." Her words revealed yet another aspect of our dysfunctional dynamic. The expectation that I should justify setting any boundary with an explanation they deemed acceptable. As if my no wasn't valid on its own, but required their approval of My reasons? Jennifer, I said quietly. The point is that I shouldn't need a terminal illness in my closest friend to justify setting boundaries around my time. You and your siblings have grown accustomed to my constant availability without considering what I might be sacrificing to provide it. Another silence fell, longer this time. When Jennifer spoke again, her voice carried a new note of self-awareness. You're right. We've been treating your time as less valuable than ours. I didn't realize how one-sided things had become. Her acknowledgement was a small step forward, but I knew from experience with patients' families that insight didn't always translate to changed behavior. Thank you for understanding, I said. Now I need to go. Martha and I have a lot to sort through in the coming days. After hanging up, I made myself a cup of tea and carried it to the porch swing, needing the comfort of the rhythmic motion and the connection to Robert it always evoked. The spring afternoon was beautiful, dogwood trees in full bloom along my street, the air carrying the scent of freshly cut grass from a neighbor's yard. Life continuing its cycles even as Martha's was drawing to a close, even as my own entered yet another unexpected phase. I had barely settled into the gentle sway of the swing when my phone rang yet again. Melissa's name appeared this time, completing the trifecta of my children checking in once Thomas had raised the alarm about my unprecedented refusal. Mom? Jennifer just called me. Is it true about Martha? Melissa skipped any greeting, her naturally dramatic personality evident in her tone. That's so awful. Do you need me to come stay with you? I could bring the kids this weekend and help you process everything. The offer was clearly well-intentioned, but revealed how little my youngest understood what I actually needed. More people in my house, more demands on my attention, more emotional labor managing children's activities would only drain the resources I needed to conserve for Martha. Thank you, but that's not necessary, I said gently. What I need right now is time and space to support Martha through this difficult journey. That means I won't be available for regular childcare for the foreseeable future. But who's going to watch the kids when I have events? Alarm crept into Melissa's voice. Mom, I have 3 major corporate functions in the next month, and the kid's father is terrible about sticking to the custody schedule. The question hung between us, a perfect encapsulation of how my role had been defined by my family's needs rather than my own life. Not, how can I support you during this difficult time? But, who will meet my childcare needs if you don't? I don't know, Melissa, I said truthfully. But you'll need to figure it out, just as you would if I were ill or traveling or otherwise unavailable. I can still see the grandchildren for normal visits and family gatherings, but I can no longer be the on-call childcare provider for all 3 of you. But that's going to be so hard on everyone, she protested. The kids are used to staying with you. They love coming to your house. And I love having them here, I assured her. But there's a difference between scheduled visits that work for everyone and last-minute demands that assume my time has no value of its own. I never thought of it that way, Melissa admitted, her voice small. I guess we have kind of treated you like you're always on standby for us. Yes, I agreed. You have. And I allowed it because I love you all and treasure time with my grandchildren. But Martha's situation has reminded me how finite life is, and I need to use my time in ways that honor my own needs too. The conversation ended with Melissa promising to figure something out for her upcoming events, though the slight panic in her voice suggested she had no immediate solutions in mind. I felt a twinge of guilt at her distress, but also the strengthening conviction that this boundary was long overdue. As evening approached, I prepared a simple dinner and ate it on the porch, watching the neighborhood transition from day to night. Children returned from after-school activities, parents arrived home from work, retired couples like I should have been with Robert walked dogs along the sidewalk. The ordinary rhythm of community life continued around me, even as my own patterns were being forcibly reconstructed by Martha's diagnosis and my family's resistance to changing expectations. My phone remained silent through dinner, my 3 children, perhaps conferring among themselves about this new development, or simply processing our conversations individually. The reprieve gave me space to think about the road ahead, supporting Martha through her final months while also maintaining the fragile new boundaries I'd established with my family. As darkness fell, I moved indoors and settled in my favorite reading chair, the one directly beneath the reading lamp Robert had installed at the perfect angle for preventing eye strain, as he'd proudly announced. I picked up the novel I'd started weeks ago, but had made little progress on, always too tired from childcare to focus on reading. The phone rang just as I was finding my place in the story. Unknown number appeared on the screen, and I almost let it go to voicemail, wary of telemarketers at this hour. Something, intuition or perhaps just the unusual events of the day, prompted me to answer anyway. Mrs. Winters? An unfamiliar female voice spoke my name as a question. Eleanor Winters? Yes, this is Eleanor. Mrs. Winters, my name is Diane Everett. I'm the volunteer coordinator at Bayview Hospital. Your friend Martha Sullivan gave me your number. She said you might be interested in a new program we're developing. A program? I echoed, confused by this unexpected call. What kind of program? It's called Seniors Supporting Seniors, Diane explained, her voice warming with enthusiasm. We're establishing a network of retired healthcare professionals and other qualified seniors who can provide companionship, transportation to medical appointments, and basic support for elderly patients without adequate family assistance. I sat up straighter, intrigued despite my confusion. And Martha suggested me for this? She did, Diane confirmed. She said you were not only a retired nurse with extensive experience, but also someone with exceptional compassion and understanding of end-of-life issues. When she mentioned her own diagnosis and that you'd be supporting her, she thought you might be interested in extending that support to others once her journey is complete. The realization of what Martha had done brought tears to my eyes. Even facing her own mortality, she was thinking ahead to what I might need after she was gone. Not just a meaningful way to use my professional skills, but a framework for continuing to be of service without being exploited. Martha also mentioned, Diane continued, seemingly unaware of my emotional response, that you've been providing extensive childcare for your family and might be looking for a more balanced way to contribute. Our program includes modest compensation for transportation and time commitments, and volunteers control their own schedules completely. No last-minute assignments or emergency calls. I found myself smiling through tears at Martha's thorough understanding of exactly what I needed. Meaningful work that utilized my skills, reasonable compensation that acknowledged the value of my time, and most importantly, control over my own schedule. I would very much like to learn more, I told Diane. Could we meet sometime this week to discuss the details? Absolutely, she replied warmly. How about Thursday morning at the hospital's community outreach office? Martha mentioned she has a doctor's appointment that morning that you'll be attending with her. Perhaps afterward? The phone call that changed everything hadn't been the confrontation with Thomas or the worried check-ins from Jennifer and Melissa. It had been Martha's call that morning, setting in motion a transformation that would ultimately reshape not just my relationship with my family, but my entire approach to this chapter of my life. As I prepared for bed that night, I found myself thinking of Robert's words about building a home where memories could find you. Perhaps this next phase would be about building a life where purpose could find me, not in martyrdom to family demands, but in balanced service that honored both my needs and the needs of others. The challenges ahead were significant, supporting Martha through her final journey, establishing firm and consistent boundaries with my children, exploring this new opportunity with the hospital program. But for the first time in years, I felt something lifting inside me, the weight of invisible obligations giving way to the lightness of conscious choice. Tomorrow would bring its own complexities and conversations. My children would likely test the boundaries I was establishing, struggling to adjust to this new reality where Grandma wasn't perpetually available. Martha's condition would eventually worsen, requiring more intensive support. The hospital program would present its own learning curve and adjustments. But tonight, watching the moonlight cast patterns through the bedroom curtains Robert had hung decades ago, I felt oddly at peace. Sometimes the most devastating news becomes the catalyst for necessary change. Sometimes losing one thing, the comfortable patterns we've fallen into, the security of known expectations, opens the door to discovering something equally valuable: our own strength, our own worth, our own right to determine how our precious time is spent. "You'd be proud of me today, Robert," I whispered into the quiet room. "I'm finally remembering what you always knew, that showing our children what a woman with purpose looks like is the greatest gift I can give them." And somewhere in the gentle creak of the old house settling for the night, I could almost hear his warm chuckle of agreement. The meeting with Diane Everett at Bayview Hospital's Community Outreach Office exceeded my expectations. On Thursday morning, I accompanied Martha to her first oncology appointment, a sobering experience that reinforced the gravity of her diagnosis, even as she faced it with characteristic straightforwardness. Afterward, while Martha went for additional blood work, I made my way to the hospital's administrative wing where Diane had her office. The Seniors Supporting Seniors program grew out of a need we identified during discharge planning, Diane explained, offering me coffee in a mug bearing the hospital's logo. She was a compact woman in her 60s with silver-streaked dark hair and the brisk efficiency of someone who had spent decades in healthcare administration. Many of our elderly patients were being readmitted within weeks because they lacked basic support at home, someone to ensure they took medications correctly, ate proper meals, or made it to follow-up appointments. "That doesn't surprise me," I said, remembering similar challenges during my nursing career. "The gap between hospital care and independent living can be treacherous for seniors." Diane nodded. "Exactly. Professional home health services are expensive, and often short-term based on insurance limitations. Family members may be distant, unavailable, or overwhelmed. But we realized there's this incredible untapped resource: healthy, active seniors with healthcare backgrounds," I finished for her, immediately grasping the concept. "Precisely." Diane's eyes lit up. "Retired nurses, physical therapists, social workers, even experienced caregivers, all with valuable skills and knowledge, many looking for meaningful part-time work that utilizes their expertise. The beauty is that our volunteers understand seniors' needs in a way younger caregivers sometimes don't, and they often have more flexible schedules than working-age adults." As she outlined the program details, I found myself growing increasingly enthusiastic. Volunteers would commit to supporting 1 or 2 clients at a time, depending on need levels and their own availability. Services would include transportation to medical appointments, medication reminders, light meal preparation, and most importantly, companionship from someone who understood both the medical and emotional aspects of aging or illness. We provide training, liability coverage, and a stipend of $15 per hour for direct service time, plus mileage reimbursement," Diane continued. "It's not meant to be a full income, but rather reasonable compensation that acknowledges the value of specialized skills while keeping services affordable for clients." The most appealing aspect was the scheduling structure. Volunteers would provide their availability in advance, appointments would be scheduled accordingly, and no one would be pressured to accept last-minute assignments or emergency coverage. "Boundaries are built into the program design," Diane emphasized, perhaps picking up on my particular interest in this aspect. "We want sustainable, high-quality support, not volunteer burnout. That means respecting everyone's time constraints and personal lives." By the end of our meeting, I had completed preliminary paperwork to join the program once it launched the following month. As I left Diane's office to meet Martha at the hospital cafe, my mind was already considering how this opportunity might fit into my future, structured enough to provide purpose and connection, flexible enough to accommodate my evolving family, boundaries, and Martha's needs during her illness. Martha was waiting at a corner table, looking more tired than I'd ever seen her, but managing a smile as I approached. "So, what did you think of Diane's program?" "I think it's brilliant," I admitted, settling across from her. "And I think you're meddling in my life in the best possible way." She laughed softly. "Someone had to. You weren't doing it yourself." I reached across the table to squeeze her hand, noting the new fragility beneath my fingers. "Thank you for thinking of me even now, when you have every right to be focused only on yourself." "Oh, please." Martha dismissed my gratitude with a wave. "Focusing entirely on myself sounds absolutely dreary. Besides, planning your future gives me something constructive to do with all this unwelcome awareness of mortality." That was Martha, practical to the core, finding purpose even in terminal illness. We spent the next hour discussing her treatment. Options? Limited. My grandchildren? Complicated. And the paintings we'd both started in the art class? Unfinished. By the time I drove her home, we had laughed as much as we had sat in somber silence, the full spectrum of a friendship deep enough to hold both. The rest of the week brought a series of negotiations with my family as they tested the new boundaries I was establishing. Thomas, after his initial frustration, had apparently spent time reflecting on our conversation. He called on Friday with a different approach. "Mom, I've been thinking about what you said, about us taking you for granted," he began, his voice carrying the thoughtful tone I recognized from childhood when he was trying to solve a complex problem. "You're right. I have been treating your time as less valuable than ours, and that's not fair." His acknowledgement warmed me. "Thank you for understanding, Thomas." "I still need help with the kids while Beth is away," he continued. "But I've come up with a more reasonable request. Instead of asking you to take them every day after school, could you pick up Charlotte on Tuesdays and Thursdays? Just those 2 specific days each week for the next 2 weeks. I've arranged for Madison and Liam to join after-school clubs on those days, and I've found a college student who can cover Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays." The proposal represented significant effort on his part. He had found alternative solutions for the majority of his childcare needs and was asking for a limited defined commitment rather than open-ended availability. It felt like respectful negotiation rather than entitled expectation. "That sounds reasonable," I agreed. "I can commit to Tuesdays and Thursdays from after school until you can pick her up. What time would that be?" "I should be able to get there by 6, he said. "And Mom? I'll actually be there at 6, not 6:30 or 7. Your time matters too. Small steps, but meaningful ones." Jennifer approached the situation with her characteristic efficiency. On Saturday morning, she arrived at my door with a neatly typed schedule in hand and the twins waiting in the car. "I've analyzed our family calendar and identified exactly when we'll need your help over the next month," she explained, handing me the color-coded document. "Every date and time is listed. No last-minute additions. If something comes up that's not on this schedule, Tom and I will figure it out ourselves." I scanned the paper, noting that she had limited requests to 2 afternoons each week plus 1, Saturday morning when both she and Tom had work commitments. "This is thoughtful, Jennifer. I appreciate the organization and clear expectations." "It's the least I could do," she said, a hint of embarrassment coloring her words. After our conversation, I realized how one-sided things had become. "You've always been so reliable that we stopped seeing your help as a gift and started treating it as an entitlement." Before leaving, she added, "The twins and I would like to take you to that art exhibition this weekend, the one you mentioned for your birthday. It's closing Sunday, but we could go tomorrow afternoon if you're available. My treat, of course." The gesture, remembering my interest in the exhibition, making concrete plans rather than vague promises, touched me deeply. "I'd like that very much," I told her. Melissa proved the most challenging adjustment, as I had anticipated. She called 3 times with emergencies, that, upon gentle questioning, revealed themselves to be poor planning or unwillingness to utilize other available options. Each time I maintained firm boundaries while offering constructive alternatives. No, I can't take the children overnight with 2 hours' notice because your event is running late, I explained patiently. But have you contacted their father? Or perhaps the parents of Jack's friend Noah? You mentioned they've offered reciprocal sleepovers before. After the third such conversation, Melissa finally seemed to understand that my no wasn't going to transform into a reluctant yes under pressure. "This is really happening, isn't it?" she asked, a note of resignation in her voice. "You're actually not going to be our safety net anymore." "I'm still your mother and I'm still the children's grandmother," I clarified. "That hasn't changed. What's changing is the expectation that I'll drop everything in my life to accommodate last-minute requests or poor planning." By the end of the second week following Martha's diagnosis, a new pattern was emerging in my family dynamics. My children were becoming more respectful of my time, more thoughtful in their requests, and more resourceful in finding alternatives when I wasn't available. The grandchildren, contrary to my children's predictions, adjusted quickly to the new arrangements. They still enjoyed their time with me, but now it was scheduled and intentional, rather than haphazard and emergency-driven. Meanwhile, Martha's condition progressed with the cruel efficiency typical of pancreatic cancer. By early May, just 3 weeks after her diagnosis, she had moved into hospice care at home, with visiting nurses providing medical support and me coordinating her broader needs. I spent several hours with her each day, sometimes handling practical matters like medication management or communication with her distant children, other times simply sitting together watching old movies or reminiscing about our nursing school adventures. "You know what I regret?" she asked one afternoon as spring sunshine streamed through her bedroom window. We had positioned her hospital bed to face the garden she had tended for decades, now bursting with late spring blooms. "I wish I'd taken that painting class with you years ago when you first asked. Such a silly thing to put off." "We could still do it," I suggested, adjusting her pillows. "I could bring supplies here and we could paint together." Martha laughed weakly. "Awful idea. I'd make a terrible mess and my attention span is about 15 minutes these days." She patted my hand. "But I love that you suggested it. That's why I value your friendship. You still see possibilities where others would only see limitations." The following day, I brought a small sketch pad and pencils anyway. While Martha dozed, I drew the view from her window: the flowering dogwood, the bird feeder where chickadees and finches squabbled over seeds, the stone bench where she had often sat reading in summer evenings. When she woke, I showed her the sketch. "That's exactly right," she whispered, tracing the pencil lines with a fragile finger. "Would you leave it here? I'd like to look at it when you're not around, in those bittersweet weeks of supporting Martha while also reclaiming boundaries. With my family, I discovered unexpected reserves of strength and clarity. The woman who had once allowed herself to become invisible within her own family was finding her voice, her purpose, and her rightful place. Not through confrontation or rejection of family ties, but through honest communication and the courage to express my own needs alongside theirs. The Senior Supporting Seniors program launched in mid-May with an orientation session for the initial group of 12 volunteers. Besides myself, the group included 3 other retired nurses, a physical therapist, a social worker, a former hospital administrator, and 5 individuals with extensive caregiving experience. Ages ranged from 65 to 82, creating a diverse pool of skills, perspectives, and life experiences. "Each of you brings unique gifts to this program," Diane told us during orientation. "Your professional backgrounds are valuable, but equally important are the insights you've gained through your own aging journey and personal experiences with healthcare systems." The training was comprehensive but respectful of our existing knowledge, focusing on program protocols, appropriate boundaries, and the specific challenges faced by seniors returning home after hospitalization. By the end of the day, I felt reinvigorated by the sense of community and shared purpose among our volunteer group. "You've got a natural leadership quality, Eleanor," Diane commented as we gathered our materials after the session. "I'm going to start you with just one client initially, given your commitment to Martha. But I'd like you to consider becoming a mentor for new volunteers once you've gained some program experience." The suggestion surprised me. I had been so focused on scaling back responsibilities, on finding appropriate boundaries, that I hadn't considered taking on a leadership role. Yet something about Diane's confidence in my abilities resonated with the person I had been before becoming everyone's default caregiver. The head nurse who had trained generations of maternity staff, the community volunteer who had organized hospital fundraisers, the woman who had once believed her experience and knowledge held value beyond family obligations. "I'll consider it," I promised, finding myself genuinely intrigued by the possibility. My first assigned client through the program was Harold Jenkins, an 84-year-old retired high school principal recently discharged after hip replacement surgery. A widower whose only daughter lived across the country, Harold fit precisely the profile the program was designed to support. Medically stable enough for independent living, but needing regular assistance during recovery. Our initial meeting took place in his modest bungalow near Bayview's community college, where he had once taught history before moving into administration. Books lined every available wall, family photographs crowded side tables, and a large calendar hung beside the refrigerator with physical therapy appointments neatly penciled in upcoming dates. "The hospital explained the program," Harold said. After I introduced myself, his academics articulation slightly slowed by pain medication. "But I want to be clear. I don't need a nurse to manage me or a social worker to analyze me. I just need practical help until I can drive again and move around more easily." His directness reminded me of Martha, and I responded in kind. "I'm not here to manage you, Mr. Jenkins. I'm here to provide specific support that allows you to maintain your independence during recovery. You set the priorities and I'll work within the program guidelines to help meet them." He studied me thoughtfully, then nodded. "Call me Harold. And I appreciate that approach, Eleanor. Too many people see gray hair and assume incompetence." That first visit established a pattern for our twice-weekly sessions. Harold would identify specific needs: transportation to physical therapy, grocery, shopping, assistance organizing his medication system, and I would provide targeted support while respecting his autonomy. Between appointments, he managed admirably on his own, using a meal delivery service his daughter had arranged and maintaining regular phone check-ins with neighbors. The work was satisfying in ways that constant grandchild care had not been. Not because I loved my grandchildren any less, but because this relationship had clear boundaries, mutual respect, and acknowledged my professional skills. Harold valued my nursing background when discussing pain management strategies, and appreciated my practical suggestions for adapting his home environment during recovery. In return, I enjoyed his sharp mind, dry humor, and the historical perspectives he shared during our drives to appointments. As May turned to June, Martha's condition deteriorated rapidly. She transitioned to continuous care, with hospice nurses present around the clock and pain management becoming the primary focus. I adjusted my schedule to spend mornings with her, afternoons with Harold or other program responsibilities, and evenings with family as appropriate. Through it all, my children maintained the more respectful boundaries we had established, though not without occasional slips into old patterns. Jennifer sometimes forgot that my availability wasn't unlimited. Thomas occasionally attempted to extend agreed-upon childcare hours. Melissa still called with emergencies that weren't truly urgent. But these instances became exceptions rather than the rule, and my consistent reinforcement of boundaries slowly reshaped our family dynamics. The most profound change came not in their behavior, but in my response to it. I no longer felt guilt when saying no to unreasonable requests. I stopped apologizing for having my own commitments. I learned to distinguish between genuine family needs and simple convenience. between emergencies that required flexibility and poor planning that did not merit accommodation. Martha died on a beautiful June morning, slipping away peacefully while I held her hand and whispered memories of our nursing school adventures, the time we'd accidentally set off the hospital fire alarm during night shift, the inappropriate laughter we'd stifled during a particularly pompous doctor's rounds, the celebratory dinner we'd shared after passing our licensing exams. Her daughter and son arrived from overseas that afternoon, grateful for the updates I'd provided throughout her decline and the comfort of knowing their mother hadn't been alone in her final hours. The grief hit me in waves over the following days, sharp and overwhelming at times, soft and nostalgic at others. I found myself reaching for the phone to tell Martha something before remembering she was gone, catching glimpses of silver-haired women who resembled her from behind, hearing her practical voice in my head when facing difficult decisions. But, unlike the paralyzing grief after Robert's death, this sorrow coexisted with purpose and connection. The Seniors Supporting Seniors program provided structure to my days and meaningful ways to honor Martha's memory through service to others. My family, now more aware of my needs and limitations, offered genuine support rather than additional burdens during my bereavement. "What can we do to help you through this, Mom?" Thomas asked after Martha's memorial service, his arm around my shoulders in a gesture reminiscent of Robert. "Not just today, but in the coming weeks." The question, so different from their previous default of asking what I could do for them, marked how far we had come in a few short months. I thought carefully before answering, wanting to articulate my needs clearly. "Sunday dinners," I finally said. "I'd like to continue our family gatherings, but I need you all to take turns hosting or helping with preparation when it's at my house. Being together matters to me, but the logistics shouldn't fall entirely on my shoulders anymore." Thomas nodded. "We can absolutely do that. Jennifer's already mentioned rotating hosting duties, and Beth said she'd be happy to come early to help prep when it's at your place." By July, my life had found a new rhythm, very different from the constant availability that had characterized the years since Robert's death, but rich with purpose and balanced connection. I supported 3 clients through the Seniors Supporting Seniors program, working 15 to 20 hours each week on a predictable schedule that I controlled. I spent time with my grandchildren through planned visits and family gatherings rather than emergency childcare, allowing me to be fully present and engaged during our time together. Most significantly, I reclaimed pursuits that had been abandoned during years of putting everyone else first. The painting class became a weekly commitment, resulting in a small collection of watercolors now hanging in my hallway. I joined the library's book club, discovering contemporary authors I might never have encountered otherwise. I even registered for a digital photography workshop at the community college, learning to use the camera on my smartphone to document Bayview's changing seasons and historic architecture. The transformation wasn't without challenges or occasional backsliding. Old habits, both mine and my children's, sometimes reasserted themselves during stressful periods. Jennifer still occasionally called with last-minute childcare requests during busy real estate seasons. Thomas sometimes forgot that my schedule now included commitments beyond family availability. Melissa's planning skills remained a work in progress, resulting in periodic emergencies that tested my newfound boundaries. The difference was that these incidents became exceptions that we addressed directly, rather than patterns we all silently enabled. I learned to respond with clear but compassionate limits. "I'm sorry, but I have a client appointment this afternoon that I can't reschedule. Have you contacted the backup sitter we discussed?" My children gradually internalized that my no wasn't a rejection of them or their children, but a necessary aspect of maintaining my own well-being and honoring my other commitments. By late summer, the Seniors Supporting Seniors program had expanded to 25 volunteers, supporting nearly 40 clients throughout Bayview and neighboring communities. Diane asked me to formalize my mentoring role, training new volunteers and helping troubleshoot challenging client situations. The position came with additional compensation and recognition of the leadership skills I had developed through decades of nursing and life experience. "You've become the heart of this program, Eleanor," Diane told me during our quarterly review meeting. "New volunteers always comment on how your guidance helps them understand both the practical aspects and the deeper purpose of our work." The irony wasn't lost on me, that in stepping back from being my family's universal solution, I had stepped into a role where my experience and wisdom were explicitly valued. The boundaries I had established hadn't diminished my contribution to others, but had redirected it toward more sustainable and recognized channels. One warm September evening, nearly 6 months after Martha's devastating diagnosis had catalyzed these changes, my family gathered in my backyard for our now rotating Sunday dinner. Jennifer and her husband Tom had arrived early to help set up tables on the patio. Thomas and Beth brought side dishes and managed the children's activities. Even Melissa had contributed by organizing a simple but lovely table decoration of late summer flowers and candles. As we settled around the table, 3 generations sharing food and conversation in the golden light of early evening, I found myself observing the subtle but significant shifts in our family dynamic. The grandchildren still sought my attention and affection, but now shared their stories and achievements with all the adults present, rather than depending solely on me as their audience. My children checked in about my week with genuine interest, asking about my clients and photography class, rather than focusing exclusively on their own challenges and needs. Most telling was a brief exchange I overheard between Thomas and Emma, now 11 and increasingly aware of family dynamics. "Can Grandma pick us up from soccer tomorrow?" she asked her father. "Mom has that closing across town." "No, I'll arrange to leave work early," Thomas replied without hesitation. "Grandma has her volunteer mentoring session on Monday afternoons." "Oh, right," Emma nodded, accepting this explanation without complaint. "I forgot that's her busy day." The simple interaction, my scheduled commitment being respected without question, alternatives being arranged without placing the burden on me, highlighted how thoroughly things had changed. My time, my interests, and my choices now mattered. Within the family ecosystem, not as special exceptions, but as normal considerations in everyday planning. After dinner, as the adults lingered over coffee and the children played an elaborate game of their own invention on the lawn, Jennifer sat beside me on the porch steps. "You seem different, Mom," she observed, watching her twins race past in some complicated chase game with their cousins. "Happier, more, I don't know, present somehow, even with everything that happened with Martha." I considered her observation, trying to articulate the transformation I felt within myself. "I think I found a better balance," I finally said. "For years after your father died, I poured all my energy into being available for all of you, partly because I needed to feel needed, partly because it was easier than figuring out who I was without him. But eventually, I disappeared into that role, becoming everyone's safety net, but nobody's actual priority, including my own." Jennifer winced slightly at my candor, but nodded. "We should have seen what was happening," she acknowledged. "We all just got so comfortable with the arrangement that we stopped questioning whether it was good for you." "I let it happen," I admitted. "I needed to learn to value my own time and needs before I could expect anyone else to do the same." "Well, I like who you are now," Jennifer said, bumping my shoulder gently with hers in a gesture reminiscent of her teenage years. "Still our mom and the kids' grandmother, but also Eleanor, the program mentor and photographer and painter. You're modeling something important for all of us about not losing yourself in family roles." Her insight, that my reclaimed identity offered valuable lessons for my children and grandchildren, had never explicitly occurred to me. I had been focused on my own needs and boundaries, not realizing that in meeting them I was also demonstrating healthy autonomy for the next generations. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the house settled into familiar creaks and sighs, I sat in Robert's reading chair reflecting on the journey of the past 6 months. From being everyone's default solution to finding purpose beyond family obligations, from allowing my time to be treated as less valuable than others, to establishing healthy boundaries that benefited everyone involved. The change had begun with a crisis, Martha's terminal diagnosis forcing immediate boundary setting, but had evolved into something more fundamental and sustainable. Not a rejection of family obligations, but a rebalancing that allowed me to be more fully present in all areas of my life. I thought of the clients I now supported through the Seniors Supporting Seniors program. Harold with his academic precision and dry wit, Beatrice with her collection of bird figurines and stories of career barriers overcome as a female accountant in the 1960s, George with his meticulously maintained garden and grief for the wife of 60 years that sometimes overwhelmed him during our visits. Each relationship enriched my life while allowing me to contribute my skills and compassion in structured, acknowledged ways. I thought of my grandchildren, who now experienced quality time with a grandmother fully present rather than quantitative, time with a grandmother stretched thin by constant availability. Our scheduled visits had become more meaningful, focused on genuine connection rather than logistical necessity. And I thought of Martha, whose friendship had shaped so much of my life and whose illness had ironically created the catalyst for this necessary transformation. Her practical wisdom continued guiding me even in absence. I could almost hear her matter-of-fact voice. "About time you figured this out, Eleanor. Now don't backslide." The phone call that had changed everything, Martha's devastating diagnosis, had initiated a journey I never would have chosen, but now recognized as necessary. It had forced me to confront patterns that weren't serving anyone well in the long term, to reclaim my identity beyond family roles, to establish boundaries that ultimately strengthened rather than damaged my most important relationships. As I prepared for bed, I noticed a text message from Melissa that had arrived during dinner cleanup. "Mom, I've signed up for that time management workshop at the community center you mentioned. Figured it's time I stopped creating emergencies for everyone else to solve. Love you." The message, simple but significant, brought tears to my eyes. Perhaps the most meaningful outcome of these months of change was not just the improvement in my own life, but the ripple effects extending to my children as they witnessed the benefits of healthier boundaries and more balanced relationships. The journey wasn't complete, of course. Maintaining boundaries would require ongoing vigilance and occasional reinforcement. My children would sometimes slip back into old expectations during particularly stressful periods. I would sometimes feel twinges of guilt when saying no to requests that I could technically accommodate but shouldn't for my own well-being. But the foundation had been permanently altered. The woman who had once been everyone's reliable safety net had become something more complex and complete. A mother and grandmother who demonstrated healthy self-respect alongside family love. A professional whose skills were recognized and compensated appropriately. An individual pursuing interests and connections beyond caregiving roles. Robert would have been proud of this evolution. I could almost see his approving smile, hear his gentle reminder that showing our children what a balanced life looks like is one of the greatest gifts we can give them. As I drifted towards sleep, I found myself grateful for the painful catalyst that had initiated these changes. Martha's illness had forced immediate boundaries that might otherwise have taken years to establish. The phone call bringing news of her diagnosis had indeed changed everything. Not in the devastating way such calls usually do, but by setting in motion a transformation that ultimately enhanced rather than diminished the remaining years of my life. Sometimes the most profound changes begin not with careful planning, but with unexpected crises that leave no choice but to rebuild differently. My journey from taken-for-granted babysitter to valued community leader had followed no strategic path. Only the necessities of each difficult moment faced with growing clarity and courage. The woman I had become in these past 6 months, or perhaps more accurately, the woman I had reclaimed, was not defined by constant availability, but by purposeful boundaries, not by martyrdom, but by balanced service, not by invisible support, but by acknowledged contribution. As sleep claimed me, my last conscious thought was one of unexpected peace. Sometimes the most important call of our lives is not the one that brings worrying news, but the one that forces us to answer the essential questions we've been avoiding far too long. 5. Years have passed since that phone call changed the trajectory of my later years. I'm now 78, with silver hair I've finally stopped coloring and knees that protest on rainy days, but with a vitality and purpose that belies the number of candles on my birthday cake. The Seniors Supporting Seniors program has grown, beyond anything we imagined in those early months. What began with 12 volunteers and a handful of clients has expanded to over 60 trained senior volunteers, supporting more than 100 elderly community members throughout our county. We've moved from a small office in the hospital's administrative wing to dedicated space in Bayview's new community health center, complete with meeting rooms for training sessions and private consultation areas for client assessments. My role has evolved as well. 2 years ago, when Diane announced her retirement, she recommended me as her replacement for program director. The board's unanimous approval surprised me. At 76, I had imagined scaling back responsibilities rather than assuming leadership. But the position offered flexible hours, administrative support, and the chance to shape a program that had become deeply meaningful to me. "You're the obvious choice, Eleanor," the board chair told me. "You've lived the caregiver experience from both sides. You understand the medical aspects, and most importantly, you embody the program's core value, that seniors deserve dignity, purpose, and appropriate support." The transition from volunteer mentor to director brought new challenges and rewards. I now divide my time between program oversight, community outreach, and my continued work with a small caseload of clients I couldn't bear to relinquish, including Harold, who has long since recovered from his hip replacement, but continues to value our twice-monthly visits that now focus more on companionship than practical assistance. "You're stuck with me, Eleanor," he declared, when I suggested transferring him to another volunteer once his medical needs diminished. "We're halfway, through debating the definitive historical analysis of the Civil War. I can't start over with someone new. Our program has garnered attention beyond Bayview as other communities seek to replicate our model. Last year, I was invited to speak at a regional healthcare conference about innovative aging-in-place support systems, sharing the data we had, carefully collected demonstrating reduced hospital readmissions, improved quality of life, and significant cost savings compared to traditional home health services. The key insight, I told the audience of healthcare administrators and community service providers, is recognizing seniors as resources rather than just recipients of care. The reciprocal nature of our program, where active seniors support more vulnerable elders, creates meaning and purpose for both groups while addressing practical needs that family caregivers often can't consistently meet. The professional recognition has been gratifying, but equally meaningful are the personal transformations I've witnessed among our volunteers, many of whom came to the program as I did, seeking purpose after retirement or significant life changes. Former teachers, nurses, business professionals, and tradespeople have discovered new applications for lifetime skills while forming supportive communities among themselves. We gather monthly for what we call wisdom exchanges, part support, group, part continuing education, part social connection. These sessions have evolved into something vital for many volunteers, especially those who, like me, experience the isolation that often accompanies widowhood or retirement from careers that provided built-in community. Before joining this program, I spent most days alone, missing my classroom and the sense that I mattered to someone. Evelyn, a retired elementary school teacher, shared during a recent gathering. Now I help 3 clients with their medications and appointments each week, and I know my presence makes a tangible difference in their ability to remain independent. The program's growth hasn't been without challenges. Funding remains a perpetual concern despite grants and community support. Balancing client needs with volunteer availability requires constant adjustment. The emotional toll of supporting clients through decline and loss sometimes weighs heavily on volunteers who have formed deep attachments. But these challenges are matched by profound rewards. The gratitude of clients who can remain in their homes rather than moving to facilities, the relief of distant family members knowing their loved ones have consistent support, the sense of purpose that energizes volunteers well into their 70s and 80s. As the program has flourished, my relationship with my own family has continued evolving in ways that would have seemed impossible during those years when I served as their perpetual backup system. The boundaries I established during that critical period of change have become normalized, creating healthier patterns that benefit everyone involved. Sunday family dinners remain a cherished tradition, now rotating among our homes with shared responsibility for preparation and cleanup. My children have developed their own support networks and childcare arrangements rather than defaulting to me for every scheduling conflict. The grandchildren still spend time with me regularly, but through planned visits with clear beginnings and endings rather than emergency drop-offs. Jennifer, now in her early 50s, has become particularly reflective about our transformed relationship. During a quiet moment at a recent family gathering, she confided, "You know what I appreciate most about the changes you made, Mom? You forced us all to become more resourceful and less entitled. I see friends my age still treating their parents like unpaid staff, and now I recognize how unhealthy that is, for everyone involved." Her insight touched me deeply. The recognition that what had initially felt like my withdrawal of support had actually fostered greater independence and respect within our family system. By refusing to remain the path of least resistance for every childcare need, I had pushed my children toward solutions that ultimately strengthened their own parenting abilities and support networks. Thomas, always the most thoughtful of my children, has integrated the lessons most thoroughly. He now carefully negotiates any requests for grandchild care, offering clear parameters and expressing genuine gratitude rather than entitled expectation. What works better for you, Mom? Tuesday afternoon or Thursday morning? Has replaced the assumption that any time would work because my schedule wasn't considered important. Even Melissa, whose disorganization had once created the most emergencies requiring my intervention, has developed better planning skills and alternative support systems. The time management workshop she mentioned in that text message 5 years ago proved transformative, helping her recognize how her chaos affected others and providing practical strategies for improvement. "I realized I was teaching my kids terrible habits," she admitted during a rare mother-daughter lunch last month. "They were learning that poor planning was normal and that someone else would always solve their problems. Now I try to model better systems for them, not perfect, but better." The grandchildren's perspective on these changes fascinates me most. The older ones, who remember the previous dynamic, occasionally reference the shift. "Remember when Grandma was basically running a daycare center?" Emma, now 16, commented recently while helping me prepare Sunday dinner. "You were always so tired then. You seem happier now." Her observation that my availability hadn't necessarily equated to quality relationship confirmed what I had come to understand: that boundaries weren't selfish, but essential for authentic connection. By reclaiming my identity beyond grandmother and emergency childcare provider, I had actually become more fully present during the time we did spend together. The youngest grandchildren, who never experienced the previous pattern, simply accept our current relationship as normal, a grandmother who has her own interesting life and commitments, but makes regular, meaningful time for them. 7-year-old Lily, Melissa's daughter from her second marriage, recently told me with great seriousness, "When I grow up, I want to help old people like you do, Grandma. But I also want to paint pictures and have a garden." Her matter-of-fact assumption that life should contain multiple sources of meaning and purpose, service to others balanced with personal interests, suggests the most significant impact of my transformation might be modeling healthier patterns for the next generations. My personal life has blossomed in ways I couldn't have anticipated when Martha's illness forced those initial boundary-setting conversations. The painting class I recommitted to has become a centerpiece of my creative expression, leading to participation in the community center's annual art exhibition and even a few modest sales of my work. The digital photography workshop evolved into regular outings with a small group of fellow enthusiasts who document Bayview's seasonal changes and historical architecture. Most unexpectedly, I've discovered a talent for writing, beginning with program documentation and grant applications, for seniors supporting seniors, then expanding to personal essays about aging, caregiving, and reclaiming identity in later years. Last year, the local newspaper began publishing my monthly column, Perspectives on Aging, which addresses everything from practical advice on navigating healthcare systems to reflections on finding meaning in life's final chapters. Your column helped me talk to my mother about moving from her house, a reader wrote recently. The way you described honoring independence while acknowledging changing needs gave us a framework for a conversation we'd been avoiding for years. Such feedback reinforces my belief that our later years can be among our most impactful if we're willing to share hard-earned wisdom with transparency and humility. The experiences that shaped me, from the joy of raising 3 children to the grief of losing Robert, from the exploitation as everyone's default caregiver to the empowerment of establishing healthy boundaries, have all contributed to perspectives worth sharing with others facing similar challenges. This morning, I stood in my kitchen preparing coffee, gazing out at the garden where spring plantings are beginning to emerge from soil Robert and I amended together decades ago. The house still holds his presence in the bookshelves he built, the porch swing that creaks in familiar rhythms, the reading lamp positioned at what he considered the perfect angle. But it also contains evidence of my evolution since his absence. Paintings, lining the hallway, photographs of seniors supporting seniors events on the refrigerator, a desk in the spare bedroom covered with notes for upcoming columns and program initiatives. The calendar hanging beside the coffee maker reflects this balanced life: Sunday family dinner at Thomas and Beth's house, Tuesday morning client visits followed by a program staff meeting, Wednesday afternoon painting class, Thursday mentoring session with new volunteers, Friday lunch with Harold to discuss the biography he's helping me organize for the Historical Society, Saturday photography outing to capture spring blooms along the harbor. Commitments and pleasures carefully balanced, meaningful connections with various communities maintained, boundaries clearly established and respected. As I carried my coffee to the porch swing, my favorite morning ritual regardless of weather, I reflected on the countless women my age who remain trapped in roles defined solely by others' needs. Grandmothers raising grandchildren without acknowledgement or support, widows expected to center their remaining years around family availability, retirees whose skills and wisdom go unrecognized beyond occasional childcare duties. The phone call that changed everything, Martha's cancer diagnosis that forced immediate boundary setting, had ultimately liberated me from a similar fate. The crisis that initially seemed purely tragic had contained within it the seeds of necessary transformation, pushing me toward changes I might otherwise have postponed indefinitely. Martha herself would appreciate the irony. I could almost hear her practical voice. It took a terminal diagnosis to get you to establish basic boundaries? Seems a bit extreme, Eleanor. But whatever works. The thought brought a smile as I gently rocked in the morning sunlight, listening to birds announcing spring's arrival in the oak tree Robert had planted when Michael was born. Martha's legacy lived on not just in my memories of our 5-decade friendship, but in the program she had connected me with during her final months, the opportunity that became the framework for my reinvented life. My reverie was interrupted by the arrival of Thomas's car in my driveway, right on schedule for our planned breakfast meeting. At 51, he has gray threading his dark hair, and reading glasses he sometimes forgets are perched on his head, but his smile still carries echoes of the earnest boy who once built elaborate structures with the blocks Robert made him. Morning. Mom, he called, climbing the porch steps with a bakery bag in one hand and laptop case in the other. I brought those cranberry scones you like. Our monthly breakfast meetings had become tradition, a time to connect without the larger family. Present, to discuss everything from program challenges to his architectural projects, to deeper reflections on life and purpose. Today's agenda included reviewing preliminary plans for an expansion of the community health center that would provide additional space for seniors supporting seniors, a project Thomas's firm had taken on at reduced rate in recognition of the program's community impact. Perfect timing, I greeted him, gesturing toward the second mug of coffee I'd prepared. I've been thinking about the eastern exposure for the new consultation rooms and whether we could incorporate more natural light. As we settled at the kitchen table, spreading plans across its surface and diving into discussion of practical details and design philosophy, I was struck by the easy collaboration between us. Professional peers sharing expertise across generations, mother and son connected through shared values rather than obligation. Two adults whose relationship had evolved beyond the imbalanced dynamic of perpetual giver and entitled receiver. You know, Thomas commented, pausing to refill our coffee cups. This project feels special, not just because it's your program, but because it represents something important about how communities should work. The way different generations support each other instead of being segregated by age and need. His observation echoed my own thinking about the program's deeper significance. That's exactly it, I agreed. We've created artificial divisions between life stages that don't serve anyone well. Seniors are isolated from meaningful contribution, families are overwhelmed without community support, and we all lose the wisdom transfer that once happened naturally in extended family structures. Your program bridges those gaps, Thomas noted. And on a personal level, so has the change in our family dynamic. The kids get quality time with you focused on connection rather than convenience, and you model active aging in a way that completely reshapes what they expect from their later years. His insight into the intergenerational benefits of our transformed relationship reflected growth I couldn't have imagined during those difficult early conversations 5 years ago. What had begun as necessary boundary setting to protect my own well-being had evolved into something with far-reaching impact across generations, modifying expectations, demonstrating healthier patterns, creating new possibilities for what family relationships could become. We spent the next 2 hours reviewing plans for the health center expansion, discussing innovative design elements that would support the program's community-building goals while meeting practical needs for accessibility and functionality. Thomas's willingness to adapt standard architectural approaches based on my experience with senior clients illustrated another aspect of our evolved relationship. His recognition of my expertise and the value of my perspective. As he gathered his materials to leave for a client meeting, Thomas paused at the door. I almost forgot. Beth and I want to take you to dinner next Wednesday for your 79th birthday. Just the 3 of us. At that new seafood place on the harbor you mentioned wanting to try. The thoughtful invitation, planned in advance, considerate of my interests, structured as a gift of time rather than an expectation of service, contrasted sharply with that forgotten 73rd birthday that had marked the beginning of my transformation. The difference wasn't just in the acknowledgement of the occasion, but in the underlying assumption that my preferences and celebration mattered. I'd love that, I told him, touched by the consideration. It's already on my calendar as free time, so it works perfectly. After Thomas left, I returned to the porch swing, reflecting on the journey of these past 5 years. From taken-for-granted babysitter to program director, from family safety net to respected matriarch with boundaries and purpose beyond caregiving, from invisible support to acknowledged contributor both within my family and the broader community. The vibration of my phone interrupted these thoughts, and I checked the screen to find a text message from Diane, my predecessor at Seniors Supporting. Seniors who had become a close friend since her retirement. Committee approved full funding for program expansion. Board vote next week, but looking good. Congratulations, Eleanor. Your presentation made all the difference. The news sent a wave of satisfaction through me. The funding would allow us to hire additional administrative support, expand volunteer training, and increase client capacity by nearly 30%. More isolated seniors would receive the support they needed to remain in their homes. More active elders would find meaningful ways to contribute their skills and compassion. And more families would gain the community assistance that made caregiving sustainable, rather than overwhelming. All of this growing from a seed planted in crisis, Martha's phone call that had forced immediate boundary setting, creating space for new possibilities to emerge. The thought brought a poignant smile as I typed a response to Diane. Wonderful news. Martha would be pleased her meddling has helped so many people. Diane's reply came quickly. She'd be prouder of you than the program. You've built something remarkable, Eleanor. Not just professionally, but personally. Not many people reinvent themselves so completely at 73. Her words captured something essential about this journey. That the most significant transformation hadn't been the program's growth, or even my professional role within it, but my own evolution from someone defined by others' needs to a woman living with purpose, boundaries, and balanced connections across multiple communities. As morning stretched toward afternoon, I gathered materials for my afternoon mentoring session with new volunteers. The binder contained practical guidelines, resource information, and scenario exercises I had developed based on common challenges in senior support work. But the most important message wasn't in the written materials at all. It was the modeling of healthy boundaries, sustainable service, and the belief that later life could be among our most purposeful chapters. Looking back across these 5 transformative years, I recognize that Martha's devastating diagnosis became the catalyst for necessary change I might otherwise have postponed indefinitely. The phone call that initially seemed to bring only sorrow ultimately opened doors to unimagined purpose, deeper family connections, and a more authentic expression of my gifts and values. The journey from being everyone's reliable safety net to becoming a woman with acknowledged worth beyond availability hasn't always been smooth. There have been difficult conversations, occasional backsliding into old patterns, moments of guilt when saying no to family requests. Establishing and maintaining boundaries requires ongoing vigilance and occasional reinforcement, especially during periods of family stress or transition. But the fundamental shift has been internalized by everyone involved. My children now consider my schedule and preferences rather than assuming constant availability. My grandchildren understand that quality time involves mutual planning rather than emergency solutions. My own sense of worth no longer depends on being perpetually needed, but on being genuinely valued for my unique contributions. Most significantly, this transformation has rippled outward beyond my personal life to touch the broader community. Dozens of senior volunteers have found renewed purpose through the program I now direct. Hundreds of elderly clients have maintained independence with dignity through the support we provide. Countless families have discovered sustainable caregiving patterns through the community resources we connect them with. All of this growing from that single phone call, Martha's cancer diagnosis that forced immediate boundary setting, creating the crisis that ultimately liberated me from patterns that diminished rather than enhanced my final chapters. What began in sorrow evolved into purpose, connection, and unexpected joy. As I prepare to leave for my afternoon commitments, I pause in the hallway where photos of 3 generations line the walls. My children in various life stages, grandchildren, growing toward adulthood, beloved friends including Martha in healthier times. Alongside these traditional family photos hang newer images capturing different aspects of my current life. Seniors supporting, seniors volunteer gatherings, my painting group's exhibition, the photography club's harbor adventure, newspaper clippings of my published columns. Together, these images tell the story of a life fully lived, not perfect or without significant losses, but rich with meaning, connection, and continued growth even in its later chapters. A life that encompasses family bonds without being limited to them. A life that honors the past while remaining open to new possibilities. A life that balances giving to others with honoring my own needs and gifts. You'd be proud of me, Robert. I whisper to the familiar presence I still sense in quiet moments. It took me longer than it should have, but I finally found my way back to the woman you always saw in me. The one with purpose beyond caregiving, with wisdom worth sharing, with boundaries that make genuine love possible. And somewhere in the gentle creak of the old house settling, in the familiar scent of the roses we planted together decades ago, in the morning light illuminating photos of the family we created, I feel his loving agreement, and Martha's practical satisfaction that her final gift to me was the catalyst for such profound transformation. The phone call that changed everything 5 years ago continues rippling outward, touching lives beyond anything I could have imagined in those painful early days. What began as necessary boundary setting to support a dying friend has evolved into a new chapter defined not by limitation, but by possibility, not by invisible service, but by acknowledged contribution, not by obligation, but by chosen purpose. At 78, I stand at the intersection of family matriarch, community leader, creative explorer, and wisdom sharer, roles that complement rather than compete with one another, identities that together form a richer whole than any single definition could provide. The journey continues evolving, bringing new challenges and opportunities with each passing season, but grounded in the essential truth that transformed everything. My time has value. My needs matter. My gifts deserve recognition. My boundaries create possibility rather than limitation. And sometimes the call that initially seems to bring only sorrow contains within it the seeds of necessary transformation. If we have the courage to answer not just the phone, but the deeper questions it raises about how we wish to live our remaining years. Closing shot. Eleanor walking confidently toward the community health center, program materials in hand, greeting both seniors and young families along the way. Her posture and expression conveying purpose, wisdom, and the quiet joy of a woman who has found her rightful place in the interconnected communities that give her life meaning. Thank you for witnessing this journey with me. If my story resonates with your own experiences, whether as a caregiver feeling taken for granted, a retiree seeking meaningful purpose, or someone navigating the delicate balance of family obligations, remember that it's never too late to establish healthy boundaries and reclaim your own worth. The most profound transformations often begin not with grand plans, but with small acts of courage, a single no that opens space for future yes responses aligned with your deepest values, a moment of crisis that forces necessary change, a recognition that serving others sustainably requires honoring your own needs alongside theirs. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.